You remember me? Yeah. You remember me.
Just a quick spoiler warning before we get started. As a heads up, there will be some major spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2 in this video, so please watch at your own discretion. I want to make this clear right off the bat. I really liked The Last of Us Part 2. I recognize how divided a lot of fans are about it, but I think regardless of whether you liked the game or not, you'll be able to agree with me when I say that I think the general idea for the upcoming Factions game mode completely undermines many of the points that Naughty Dog is trying to make throughout the story of The Last of Us Part 2. Just to be clear, there is no official confirmation that the multiplayer component that's been hinted at by Naughty Dog is going to be another Factions mode, but it's pretty clear through those hints and references that Factions is what's on the horizon next for The Last of Us. For those who don't know, Factions is the multiplayer expansion for the original Last of Us that saw players pick from one of two survivor groups, the Hunters or the Fireflies, to fight for supplies. Different game modes had different objectives, but at the end of the day, each mode ultimately ended up being about killing people on the other team while completing objectives. From my perspective, The Last of Us Part 2 makes a lot of statements about love, forgiveness, the cycle of violence, and most importantly, the destructive nature of tribalism and the us versus them mentality. Unless Naughty Dog is planning on sending a message about the horrors of those mentalities in a mode literally titled Factions, I think they're missing the point of their entire game. The point is, as a developer, you can't enforce those types of big themes and have them hit as hard as they do, while also having a mode in your game that rewards you for getting sick headshots on people of the opposing side. To me, you cannot condemn tribalism in one part of your game while also glorifying it in another. A mode like that dilutes everything that Naughty Dog is trying to say in The Last of Us Part 2. Throughout the game, Ellie kills so many people in the name of getting revenge, and initially I was kind of on board with her. I was mad at Abby and her group of wolves for killing Joel, but as the game goes on, it's clear that Ellie maybe isn't doing all of this to avenge Joel, but because of her guilt and regret with the way she wasted her final years with him. All the shooting, stabbing, and dismemberment is essentially for nothing, and is the result of the way that Ellie was brought up. She doesn't know how to cope with her grief, so she resorts to burying it and replacing it with the simple idea that they killed one of mine, so I'm going to kill all of theirs. By the end of The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog shows their stance on this kind of destructive thinking by having Ellie lose just about everything she cares for. Her friend Jesse is killed, Tommy becomes the shell of what he once was, her girlfriend Dina leaves her with their son, and she loses some of her fingers, which robs her of the only connection she has left with Joel: music.
If I ever lose you, I surely lose myself.
With these horrible things happening to a character who chooses tribalism over forgiveness, it's pretty clear that Naughty Dog is trying to say, hey, this is bad. Alternatively, Abby starts the game as a soldier for the Washington Liberation Front, but comes to realize that the war they're fighting with opposing faction and religious group the Seraphites is senseless. She learns this because two Seraphite children save her life, breaking down those ideas of tribalism she had previously been subscribed to. It took a single act of kindness for her to start challenging the othering mentality that's been ingrained in her by years of violence and war. After this moment, she starts taking care of the two children, Yara and Lev, and vows to escape Seattle with them. Towards the end of the game, Abby has the opportunity to kill Dina and Ellie, but doesn't because of Lev. The two of them escape the city and are ultimately saved by Ellie because of their willingness to let tribal lines be washed away. It's clear that Naughty Dog wants to strike up a conversation about violence and us versus them, but if it's juxtaposed with a game mode that's just a reskinned team deathmatch, then I think maybe I'm good. It makes me wonder if they know why people like their game. Sure, the combat is good from a gameplay perspective, but The Last of Us Part 2's unflinching and realistic look at violence doesn't make me feel cool for enacting it. Now, this sort of critique is not new for Naughty Dog. The term ludonarrative dissonance was coined back in 2007 in a blog post by Clint Hawking about the original BioShock. He wrote, "BioShock seems to suffer from a powerful dissonance between what it's about as a game and what it's about as a story." After his critique was published, the term was then applied to many other games over the years, including the original Uncharted released later that year. The conversation surrounding all of the Uncharted games is that we, the player, are supposed to empathize with and root for the protagonist, Nathan Drake. He's supposed to be the good guy, but ends up killing hundreds of bad guys to achieve his goals. The message of the game is at odds with the message of the story. Naughty Dog is aware of these ludonarrative dissonance critiques of their games and seem to think that they've solved that issue. I think that The Last of Us Part 2's story and gameplay do fix this problem to a certain extent, but having the factions mode return would completely undo that fix. I feel a similar way about factions as I did about the multiplayer for Spec Ops: The Line. For those who haven't played it, Spec Ops: The Line is a third-person military shooter akin to the Call of Duty series. However, about halfway through, it takes some twists and turns that, without wishing to spoil anything, takes a very hard stance on the idea that war, violence, and the glorification of both of those things are very bad. Similar to The Last of Us Part 2, Spec Ops: The Line has some big things to say, but totally beefs it because of its basic deathmatch multiplayer modes. The only difference between Naughty Dog and Spec Ops developer Jaeger is that Jaeger wanted nothing to do with the multiplayer because it went against the game's themes and narrative, but were forced to include it by their publisher. Glorifying the violence and tribalism in The Last of Us Part 2 makes me feel gross. Putting a bunch of players on opposite sides of an arena and instructing them to kill anyone who doesn't look like them makes me feel gross. The Last of Us factions makes me feel gross, and frankly, I don't think it's the right direction for what might be in store for the future of The Last of Us Part 2. What do you think? Are you excited for the upcoming factions mode? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe to DualShockers for all things The Last of Us.